Okay, I think we have quorum, so welcome everyone. Today we have Randall with us. I'm going to read out a quick introduction. Randall is a mentor, founder, fractional CPTO, and a product-focused engineering leader with 20 years of experience building and scaling digital platforms across healthcare, SaaS, and enterprise environments. He has led large-scale platform transformations at organizations like Teladoc Health and Blue Shield Association, supporting tens of millions of users. He's a very sharp thinker. I've enjoyed quite a few conversations with him. And with that, Randall, over to you.
Oh, well, thank you. And it's great to meet everyone. I am I'm very excited about today's topic, but I'm also allergic to presentations. So we're going to go through a presentation here, and I'm going to talk through trust and why trust in health tech is so important. Uh, and really what I'm looking to do is get through the material and highlight a couple of points, but I'd love to have a rich discussion at the end so that we can really learn from each other and not just have me as a talking head. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in. And I'm going to start here with where trust breaks in health tech. I'm going to start off with a quote. This is one of my favorite quotes from Mitch Ratcliffe, who says that computers have enabled people to make more mistakes faster than any invention in history, the possible exception of tequila and handguns. And I think this has been true since he said it many years ago, and somehow becomes more and more true, especially as we get into AI. So, talking about trust, trust is not a thing that you design into your solution. Trust is a platform that you build on every day, and you build trust by being consistent over time with transparency. And so the trust problem here is real. Trust in accurate healthcare information has been declining over the last 6 years, and that taps into four different areas that we're going to be talking through today: patient access, clinical workflows, data governance, and AI decisions. And you'll see those icons in the top right corner of the slides when we're talking about that topic. So this is one of those areas that I'd be curious to hear from folks when we get to the discussion of how have you seen trust declining in healthcare, and what does that mean on the provider side? What does that mean potentially on the payer side? What does that mean on the patient side? And what does that mean for you as a solution provider? Part of the concern here is data. You know, with AI, everything is based around data, and data error rates are significant. Inaccuracy is, 48% of providers with inaccurate registration data. That is problematic for a whole host of reasons. Patient identified record errors, a fifth, one in five people. So if we have, almost 20 folks here, that means four people on this call have errors in their EMR records. That's problematic as we get into AI, which will exacerbate those mistakes and cause maybe misdiagnosis, maybe cause issues with the clinician understanding what's actually going on with the patient, what the patient's actually experiencing with their particular condition. So these are really important areas that happen before any solution is in place. And I'll see here, I'm going to do a little interaction on the screen. If you look at the bottom row, you'll see a React button. Give me a reaction if you're familiar with explainability, what explainability is, and why it's important. So is any kind of reaction here? Is anyone familiar with explainability? A little bit? One. We got Jay, we got great. There we go. There we got a couple. But given that it's not everybody, explainability is really just very simple. It's can you explain how you arrived at that decision? AI doesn't follow a train of thought. The nature of particularly LLMs do not support explainability, and it's a major concern because how do you get confidence in an AI model that is unable or incapable of explaining how it arrived at a particular conclusion, especially if it's dealing with large and complex data sets? And so you're starting to see that in the regulatory space with the FDA, explainability is becoming not optional. It is something that we have to build in as part and parcel of the solutions that we're providing. And so explainability is one of the first things that we need to consider when we're talking about trust and how do we build trust. Explainability, auditability, accountability, bias detection, and transparency. And if you're skipping any of these, you run the risk of more than causing a bad decision to be made, you can cause actual harm to patients. Um, I remember a little while ago there was some bias detection on race because some of the imaging models were all trained on, for skin and detecting lesions on skin. They're all trained on people with lighter skin tones. And that meant that those AI models were unable to detect the same types of lesions on people with darker skin. That may not have been intentional, but it definitely was a problem. And so in practice, all of those elements combine to cause problems with adoption internal to organizations. And these are areas that are very difficult to untangle. Informed consent is a major, major problem. If patients don't know that it's AI, they may not be able to decide, I don't want my data to be used in that way. I don't want AI to be making a clinical decision. These are all things that happen at the solution level, at the provider level, at the institution level, and as we're seeing kind of across the space in the market level. Clinical workflows then are impacted by those fractured data resources. And when you have different sources of truth or different opinions that are not reconciled and not have a clear way of organizing the decision process and the data process for how those decisions are made, you can have conflicting opinions. You can have conflicting results. And that causes confusion for providers. And providers are already overwhelmed with too much data. They already have too many things coming into them, too many different systems to work with. You can see here on the left, almost 2 in 3 clinical teams use 4 or more systems. This is the chair swivel problem every day. That's a big problem because all of that means that it's on the provider to do the coordination. And that's not taking care of patients. That's a system design problem. And so we need to be aware of these things as we're trying to build out trust because that trust comes from that type of integration. How do we help reduce the burden on physicians to make better informed decisions faster with less effort? Data governance is a factor in that as well. Data governance is a major problem. We've seen attempts like HL7 FHIR, FHIR, as a way for defining interoperability between organizations. That is an area ripe for discussion. If you've ever had the opportunity to work with FHIR protocol and systems that integrate with FHIR, anything you can see you smiling there, you've had that, let's call it pleasure. There's not a clear standard here. And these are real problems that cause upstream and downstream impacts for whatever solution is coming in place. What I think is really important, though, is this is not a new problem. This is not specific to AI. AI is absolutely exacerbating it, but this is the same problem that everyone in large enterprise health tech systems have been dealing with for years, if not decades. What we need as humans are largely the same things that AI needs to do human type tasks. And so one of the things that I find really just fascinating is yes, AI is a brand new tool, but it's a tool that really just shows the things that we should have been doing all along are really important. Data quality, governance, orchestration, decision transparency, stakeholder alignment. All of those things are really important. And that's not specific to AI. What AI does is just make it more visible across more parts of the organization at a faster pace. So then you need to think through those things and build out your 5 layers of trust? How are you ensuring data quality in your systems? How are you ensuring governance, audit trails, consent? How are you ensuring orchestration? Are you spending the time to learn and understand what goes on the provider side in the workflow that they have to deal with? Do you understand the context of billing and how your data is going to be used for billing reimbursement, CPT codes? The more that you can absorb from the provider side on the things that are important to them as organizations, as individuals, the more effectively you're going to be able to support them in that space and help them help patients have improved outcomes. So instead of asking, how do we design a better UX for our tool? Think about how do we architect better governance around our data, around our integrations? How can you redirect investment from the UI to those things that build trust and help you earn trust within an organization? And we're clearly at an inflection point this year. We've gotten a lot of regulatory guidance in a variety of directions. But that regulatory guidance is absolutely critical for us to understand where the industry needs to go and how we need to support ourselves, our customers, and our patients on that journey. So that's what I'll leave you with is as you build out your trust platform and as we move into the discussion, I'm very curious to see and hear where you've seen trust breaking in systems and how you've seen that tackled. And I'll give a quick thanks to MQual, who is supporting me in this effort, and you can contact MQual. MQual is a phenomenal platform that helps providers, doctors understand the patient experience between visits. With that, thank you. I'd like to move it over to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Randall. Who goes first to kick off the discussion?
I'll go first, if that's okay. I have a question. Yeah, I've read up and done a bit of implementation on FHIR and some of these other standards in an application that I'm building. And one of the challenges that I'm having is that the standard exists as a messaging framework, which is great. There's documentation for it. It's auditable, et cetera. The problem is that every institution that I've worked with has implemented their data storage within that framework so differently that it makes it very complicated in practice to take data from disparate sources and make some unified meaning of that data.
Yep.
And so I've been sitting here trying to very recent problem, very top of mind, trying to think about how do I take this complex data from different doctors, different networks, different provider networks, et cetera, and make sense of it in a kind of unified way. Just simple things like determining what procedure occurred or what condition exists or what medication was provided is radically different across different providers. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
No, it's an astute observation, and it's a real problem. And to be honest, I haven't seen anything that really comes close to solving it. It's part of the journey that we're on as we have more and more of these systems, and with some of the regulatory relaxation that we've seen recently, that's going to accelerate. We're going to see more systems, more companies trying to compete and get access to the data and do things with that data. So I don't know that I have a great solution for you other than it's a real problem and kind of recognizing and acknowledging that it's something that needs to be tackled. And the more that you can tackle it effectively in a space that you're working in, the more you're going to be able to drive success for yourself and your organization. Hopefully that's helpful, Portia.
Yeah, thanks for speaking to us. And the slides were effective. So I know you don't like presentations, but it really got me thinking that a lot of this is not new, like you mentioned before. I mean, clinical decision support tools were around 10 years ago, AI-based, machine learning based. And so all of those concepts have been there, and we just failed to solve the problem before the floodgates open. And so I think the accessibility now of LLMs and, the sexiness of doing AI for everything has really made that line blurred as to who understands the just how the data is processed and how you can expose yourself or your company or even the patient data and increase the risk. But it's interesting that there's a lot of organizations or a lot of companies that don't have that rooting in healthcare that are then creating healthcare products. I'd be curious to get your perspective on, how to be kind of like that trust evangelist while also navigating a space that's becoming crowded with organizations that are going the LLM route, which is all about speed and and scale. Because I mean, I've worked with health plans, like a lot of people are having AI clauses in their contracts, needing to keep data separate and completely non-commingled with other data, which inherently undercuts your ability to do any meaningful, like big population. I mean, AI still needs big data sets. So I'm just curious how you think we should balance that, especially in addition to what Nathan said, where Fire is being implemented elsewhere. I always say Epic can't even integrate with Epic. Um, so I think the same is true with how different organizations will even have their AI policies, where you as a third party can even play in the space. And the data exchange might not be the easiest way to do it either. So just curious about your thoughts on that.
So that's a big topic. Let me make sure I can distill that down to a question I can answer. Um, to restate it, is your question here, how can we effectively navigate a complex set of differing data compliance requirements, data structure elements, and use that data to effectively design and build AI solutions? Is
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah,
okay? So to take those two things apart, and these kind of build on one of the things I said in the beginning, which is you build trust by being consistent over time with transparency. So some of that compliance transparency then becomes, what is your security model? How do you handling that data internally? How do you have a trust center? Have you done your certifications? Have you established by third parties that you are doing the things that you say you're doing in the way that you say you're doing, in a way that aligns with these companies' internal security and compliance policies? That's a really effective way to help ensure that you're even able to come to the table. So that's going to be kind of the policy navigation thing, is really getting into compliance and following regulatory guidelines and avoiding shortcuts that don't add value and cause more risk, right? On the disparate data sorts, that's a much more difficult problem to solve, because what you're talking about there is, how do you standardize internal data models across providers, across different systems? And to be honest, I've never seen that happen in any industry. So then the work becomes, how do you do that integration? How do you standardize yourself for the types of work and analyses you need to do? And that's a difficult discussion, but that's more of an internal one about, how do you navigate that? Where is your primary value add? What is the smallest thing you can do to drive value, learn, and iterate quickly? So the game becomes less about predicting it all up front and designing towards like a firm architecture, and more about establishing internally the practices and habits to be able to navigate disparate data sources quickly and effectively, given a very focused context, right? So if you're doing radiology imaging, very narrowly focusing on that to drive some consistency, and then maybe you have some adapters in your technology stack that allow for translation between data structures, data formats. So internally, as you're processing the data, you have all of that set up in a way that allows you to iterate quickly. And then it's a translation problem to go from your style to whoever you're getting it down to. But those are just that's just one approach. There are different approaches for how to handle that, and that's a great area of discussion. Hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, Albert.
I was curious, because I'm like pretty interested in this area. How both you and others that you've seen have approached workflow automation. Because I feel like that, we've seen it with companies such as N8N and other similar workflow automation tools that have become like really popular outside the healthcare space. And it seems like this will be like a pretty big area within healthcare, with such things as like automated like medical necessity or like what you mentioned, like insurance authorizations. How are you approaching that? And then how are some of the people that you've either worked with or sort of researched approaching it?
Workflow automation is really important. I don't think this is a thing that's specific or unique to AI. This is, how do we automate in general? You've got RPA, remote robotic process automation as well. That's another, fairly popular approach. And across the board, I think the approach is remarkably similar. They need to define the value stream. So what are the different steps in a sequence that must happen across whatever stakeholders are to go from the request to value delivered against that request, start to finish? Understanding what all those steps are, where the handoffs are, where the bottlenecks are, and then optimizing for those. Is that step necessary? Why is it going back here? Why is there rework? How do we control quality? How do we gate validation? So understanding all of that, mapping that out first, so you have an understanding of the landscape, an understanding of where you need to focus your energy first, second, third, to reduce the length of time, the lead time from start to finish. How do you get through that workflow faster without losing any kind of quality? And then it's just a matter of matching the tools. Is that something that is like an N8N or some other type of automation? Is that RPA? Is that just scripts? Is that a new tool we need to build? Is that a vendor we need to find? There are a lot of different ways of solving various aspects of that. And depending
Sorry to interrupt. Could I just
Yeah,
like focus it a little bit? So like
sure.
what I forgot to add was that, again, as everyone's mentioned, and you mentioned there's these fragmented data sources that tend to be siloed, especially in specific fields. And even some fields may not have like data storage capabilities. They may still be using like paper forms and such. So I guess like, is there, I mean, maybe the answer is just we have to wait till some of these fields catch up, or like where some company develops some sort of coherent structure that integrates it all together to develop some sort of capable and reliable workflow automation. But is there any novel things that you've seen that address this fragmentation and these maybe secure also the security elements in different fields? So I work in the substance use disorder field, and there's more security related aspects there. So I forgot to add that. I was curious what your thoughts on there.
Yeah, I don't know that that changes much my response. That those are constraints, those are factors in the workflow, but you still need to define what that workflow is. Where is the beginning, where is the end, and how do you validate that the outcome at the end is what you were looking for? Just the fact that you have paper data as opposed to maybe it's on-site in a server rack data versus cloud data. That's just one of the constraints as part of that workflow. It doesn't change the fact that there's still a workflow that needs to be mapped out. And if you look at that workflow, is the paper really the translation from a paper into a system? Is that really the bottleneck, or is there a different bottleneck, maybe in terms of quality, maybe in terms of validation? Maybe that first step is a week, but there's a 6 month lag time later on when you need to get legal approval, right? So there are different steps in that workflow. And if you don't understand the context of that workflow, you're not going to be able to identify the changes that are necessary to deliver more value faster. Does that
Great.
help?
Thanks. Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you so much, Randall.